Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast.
Hello and a warm welcome to another episode of the Avro Heritage Museum podcast. Ron Boxall served in the RAF for 13 years, working as an avionics engineer, mainly on Nimrods and Vulcans. But he wasn't only ground crew. He flew with these aircraft, maintaining them whilst they were in service in many different parts of the world. We hear about some of the highlights of his training, his early days and career in the RAF, and about his work at the Avro Heritage Museum. And Ron has some colourful stories, ranging from egg in the gas mask to a lost Nimrod in the fog, and an encounter with Prince Philip when His Royal Highness, probably not for the first time, lands into trouble with the Queen. We discover how Ron comes to be reunited after many decades with the very first aircraft that he worked on once he'd qualified. And we get a real sense of just how much Ron enjoys his work at the museum as a Nimrod cockpit guide. I caught up with Ron one Saturday afternoon at the museum, and I began by asking him what it was that first lit the aviation spark for him.
It basically started with my father. He was a radio inspector for BEA at Heathrow, and I used to go with him quite regular to work. We used to get trips around the hangars quite regular on different aircraft, Comets, Tridents. We're trying to think what the other ones are. Viscounts, Vanguards, so a few of the older ones. That's really how it all started. My father was in the RAF as well in the war.
How young would you have been then when you first got this inspiration?
I think it must have been probably around about 6.
And what was your route then? That was an early inspiration. What were the kind of steps along the way to actually working in aviation?
Basically, me and my friend from school, we used to go up to Heathrow when they had the Queen's Building. We used to spend days up there. But I was always into aircraft by then and engineering. My father was into electronics, so I got into wanting to do electronics. So I thought, well, the easiest way would be join the RAF, and I'll get the two things, which was travel, and I'll get avionics in the same time. That's what started me off in that. But I joined the Air Training Corps first. My first ambition was to be a pilot, so I got me wings as a glider pilot at White Waltham, but I couldn't pass the English, which didn't help. But they gave me the option that if I wanted to go into a technical role as radar or something like that, they could give us extra tech while I was at Cosford, and that would give me the extra if I needed for the English if I wanted to carry on as a pilot. But I found that the ground crew, I was becoming really interested in. It was really good, so I just stayed as ground crew, as air radar.
And tell us a bit about those early days then, working in ground crew, because you said you took to it. What was it that hooked you into it quite early on?
The main thing was the things you used to get up to. And a lot of the thing was that being on Nimrod at that time, you could fly with it, and that gave you the opportunity of flying to different destinations and fixing it on yourself, because you didn't have the full support of the line as it was if you were overseas anywhere. But that used to give me the inclination to do the flying. But also it was the social side of the side of it. There was a lot of antics that used to go on, and we enjoyed every minute of it.
Share some of those with us. What were the antics you got up to? Because you were all quite young then.
Well, we were quite young. We used to have too many sherbets sometimes, and there's one case where one chap had too many coming back from Norway, and he was lying on the lilo. The Nimrod we was on, it dropped like they do straight down, and he floated past me in the galley till the engines turned on, and he ended up under the Sonics rack. Or some of the other ones we used to do, like in Cyprus. I used to do the visiting aircraft squadron as spares when we was on the Vulcans, and I used to run up behind the VC-10 when it was taking off, shouting, "You've left the wheel," and people were sitting, all the little red lights would come on above, And the next thing, it was straight in the office afterwards.
I think you told me a story once about, because did they have nuclear torpedoes, the Nimrod?
Yeah.
They had dummies and real ones.
Yeah, you never knew when you were flying whether they were live or concrete. And they used to do these practice things out in the middle of the airfield. And if you weren't sure, if you kicked it and everybody ran off, it was a live one. Yeah, that was our theory.
And just tell us a bit more, because obviously there's lots of travel and quite a lot of time away from home, was it really? Because it was a roving brief, wasn't it?
If we were lucky enough, we used to go on the Nimrods. It was called West About, and that would be anything 3 months, and you'd just keep flying west all the way around the world. So you could take off from St. Morgan or Kinloss, and you go to Iceland, Canada, America, Hawaii, Christmas Island, or some of the islands out there, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. Then it would be Gan, as it was then, Madeira, Cyprus, Malta, when they were going Gibraltar. Then it'd be up to Holland, Norway, and back to the UK. Yeah.
And you were part of the team, essentially, to keep that aircraft flying. What sort of jobs would you be doing?
It would be all electronics, basically search water, or in the early days it was ASV. It would be the ECM, which was up on the top of the fin and on the wings. So it was generally everything, but also you had to do the before flights. So you had to sign to make sure the aircraft was serviceable. You'd have turnarounds if the aircraft was coming in and going back out again. And also you'd have to do the after flight, which is after it's been flying, to make sure that everything was still working, and then if not, fix it, ready for the next sortie.
You get the impression that it was a much loved aircraft. What was the bit of a magic about it?
I think the magic about the Nimrod was that it was a secret aeroplane. Nobody really knew what it did in real life, and chasing Russians and coming up at the side of them because they didn't see you coming, and you used to wave out the window at them, and they used to get the shock of their lives as we suddenly appeared, because flying at 250 feet at the side of them, they sort of knew that we meant business. But it was a really lovely aeroplane to fly in. It was a bit bumpy in times, but it was really good. I enjoyed every minute of it.
And over your career, so how many, working on Mark 1, Mark 2, how many versions, different versions did you work on them?
It was basically Mark 1, Mark 2. So Mark 1 was the ASV radar, which was the analog and some of the analog equipment. And then it was upgraded to Mark 2. But I did a 18-month stint at EMI at Hayes in London, doing the manufacturer's course on search water. And then I came to BAE back in 81, where we did the retrofit to see whether we could service the aircraft in service, because it's like everything else, they modify it, put a panel in that doesn't fit our bit of gear. So we have to modify it up. But that was the basic reason. So, yeah, I did everything on that side.
Because it had a very long service life.
Yeah, it came in, and I worked on 235, which is what's here at the museum. That was the very first one I worked on when I came out of training at St. Morgan. So it's still got a few of my my delicate repairs on. And then I was with it right up until I wasn't disbanded, but Margaret Thatcher came in and did the defence cuts in 84, and I had to come out then, although I was signed on for 15, I only actually did 13 service, but it was a shame really, but yeah, I was right through it, and then they got rid of it in 2011 altogether.
When we talked before, there were one or two stories that you wanted to tell, and one's an intriguing one, egg in the gas mask.
That was my days on the Vulcan, and we were going up to Scampton from Akatiri with 35 Squadron to do the bombing competition, and they decided that while we were landing at Scampton, they had a tachyval, which is a military exercise, and they said that we had to take our gas masks with us. But some of the blokes had put the gas masks into the cargo nets, but I had mine on me in my bag. But I was getting in-flight rations, and that's usually a boiled egg and a sandwich and a packet of crisps. And I thought I'd have the boiled egg later, so I stuck it in my gas mask bag. And when we landed at Scampton, they threw a CS canister into the back. So I tried to get my gas mask out, got it out and put it on, and I couldn't see out my left eye because my boiled egg was sitting in it. So everybody could see that I had a white eye at that particular time.
You touched on the food there. How did that operate then when you're on these long tours?
If you was on Nimrod, it wasn't too bad because you had a galley. So they used to come in with in-flight rations, so you could have steaks or sausages or whatever. But if you was on the Vulcans, you used to have to fly in the back of a Herc, and they gave you a square box with a bit what I call British rail sandwich, chilled up at the end, boiled egg, a couple of some crisps and some biscuits, and that was it. So I preferred Nimrod because you had in-flight rations. You just didn't get the stewardesses to serve it up.
So how long did you work on the Vulcan now?
I got posted to Cyprus in 1972 in February. I was out there for 2.5 years, which was the normal one for a single. But I was out there when the Turks invaded in July 74. Yeah. And the unfortunate bit was that me and my mate, I bought a car, which is duty free, and me and my mate were going to drive back over Europe, so we'd saved a while leave up. And when the Turks invaded, I couldn't get my car out. So it's still out there. I think there's a tree growing through it now because it didn't come back with us. But that was me 2.5 years on Vulcans. Yeah.
And how did that compare with the Nimrod?
It was different, being that the Nimrod was more upmarket, it was more technology of transistors and stuff like that, where the Vulcan was still wires, weights and old bits and pieces, a bit like the telephone exchange, the computer, which is the Count 3. So it was a bit different, but it was still enjoyable, to work on. It was just a bit more heavier. You could hit it harder with hammers. We still got up to antics, and my one was been down to Limassol, and I'd come back at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was supposed to be at work at 6, so I think I'd had too many sherbets. So I went into the control room to look to see if there was anything flying. Picked a Vulcan that wasn't flying, climbed into the radome, fell asleep. The next thing I did was wake up with the engines running. I thought, I'm in trouble here. Anyway, we started moving, and I thought the easiest thing to do was I took all the plugs off the navigational bombing system because it was in the radome. I think they can't fly with that. And then I found that was when they put some new not cables, but new aerials inside as well. So I bent a few of them so they couldn't fly. And then suddenly realised that the engines had gone very quiet. And in the radome, there's a big hole at the bottom, which is a drain hole. I looked through there to see what was going on. And it was a towing arm that was on the end. I was being towed to the hangar. But they can't tow with the radome open, the radar hatch. So because my mate saw me in there, so they just shut the hatch and left me in.
Did you get into trouble?
I had to go admit my defeat, and I got the choice of either fixing it or going for a 252 charge. So I decided to fix it, and I had to do it in my time. So I think it took about 10 days to put it all back together again. And then they said, well, that's your penalty for that. And with that, they sent me off to Madeira, which is a desert island in the middle of Indian Ocean. There's only camels there. Went there for 10 days. It was a bit more of a punishment.
What would a 252 charge have been for? What would have happened?
I think that would have been a court-martial, So I thought I'd do this one myself. But they knew me from old.
I know another one of your episodes was a lost Nimrod in the fog.
Yeah, that was at RAF St Morgan, and the Nimrods were just coming in then, and we were over at the old part of the airfield, which used to be the old QAR pans for the Vulcans as they were, and we had a chief there, Chief Tech Walpole, and he was obsessed by somebody nicking a Nimrod, especially if it was foggy, because we used to get a lot of sea fog. So if the sea fog come in, he would turn around and tell you to go out and check all the Nimrods were there, and we got a bit fed up with it, so we put a towing arm on and towed it down to the Sivir airport and told him his Nimrod had gone. I don't think he ever recovered from that, really.
What happened then? Were you not in trouble again?
No. I think the chief just ended up in a padded cell, I think, after that.
We do like stories about famous people. You had a pretty famous person, Prince Philip.
Yeah, it was quite regular. They used to fly down to St Morgan, and part of our job was to see the civilian any of the aircraft from the Queen's flight, and you have to just wear a white set of overalls. And Prince Philip used to quite regularly fly the Andover, as it was then, or the 748, I think is the civilian version, and he used to go as co-pilot. Anyway, he came in, and the Queen was with him, and they were doing an official visit down in Truro, I think. Anyway, we saw it in, and the Queen had got out, went up towards the car, and Philip had come up to me, and he says, I bet you look a right prat in that white uniform. With my answers was, yes. And he was smiling, and then the next minute I heard was the Queen in the background going, Philip! And he goes, oh shit, I'm in it now. And with that, he went off to the car. But we did see Philip quite regularly. He used to come down into the NAFI, and he used to buy everybody that was in the NAFI a beer. I mean, he never had the money, but he bought them. So it was cool. Yeah.
You must have seen a lot of change. Were there any moments of change where you thought, that's going to make a huge difference in the future, or was it just gradual?
It was just basically gradual, but the main change on Nimrod was the search water radar, where it went from analog to digital, and they used a pulse compression technique, which when you pinged it out to the target and it came back and you stretched it all back out, you actually got a DNA of the actual ship that you were looking for. And that is then the way that we used to do the ship recognitions. It was all done by DNA. So it was a fantastic leap forward. So that's why it took the 18 months to learn.
Yeah. If there was, over that long career, if there was any period you could go back to, which one would you choose?
I think I'd probably go back to basically the 70s and 80s, which was the most enjoyable time. And you had the two conflicts, which was the Ascension Island plus the Turks invading in Cyprus, which gave you an actual insight of what it would be like in an actual war situation. So, but apart from that, it was really good. And then once they started changing it and started congregating all the aircraft together, because you used to have Nimrods had squadrons in Singapore, Malta, St Morgan and Kinloss. But then as they was closing these down, it all accumulated at Kinloss apart from 42 Squadron and the OCU at St Morgan.
Tell us a bit more then about the Cyprus conflict.
Yeah.
How did it impinge on what you were doing?
Well, at the time, I was on Nimrods at the time, and they said that the Turks had invaded in Famagusta. So the first thing we had to do was get the Vulcans bombed and ready to fly out. What we didn't know at that time was that they were going to Mazira, and if the Turks got onto Akrotiri, they were going to come back and bomb Akrotiri. That was the operation side. But once the Vulcans had actually gone, problem rose then was that we had, I think it was over 300,000 people in Famagusta that we had to get out. They had to move them from Famagusta to Decalia, put them on Hercules, and then fly them from there to Akrotiri, and then put them onto VC-10s, Brits, or anything that came in, and Kazivac them back out again. But while I was in Cyprus, I was also part of the St John's ambulance for the cadets, doing my first aid side of it. They gave me an ambulance, and I had to follow the buses all the way up to Famagusta, and I ended up just following the buses in case anybody needed any medical help. But I did that for about 5 days, moving them out from Famagusta to Decalia. Then it was back to Akrotiri, and then help get them all onto the aircraft down there and back out again. I wasn't involved with the Gulf Wars because that was after I'd come out, but I was with Ascension Island in the Falklands. I went out to that. It was just one day I was sitting there and they said that Argentina had just invaded the Falklands. The next minute it was bags packed and we shot off to Ascension Island, and then basically it was just carrying on as normal, just servicing the aircraft out there. But you were very limited to what you could do because you didn't have a lot of spares. It was very restricted parking. We had to park in smaller areas, and a lot of it was all pushbacks with tow bars and what have you. And the accommodation was tense. You had to live in for a bit, but they had some sleeping accommodation about 2 miles away, but we didn't have any transport. And I just happened to find an old Mini, which was a good idea. And we put some dome windows in the back windows, which are off the Nimrods. And with blokes' heads in that, you could get about 8 in a Mini. So that was our transport for a few months. We had legs out the windows and all sorts.
How did you make a pathway towards here?
I mean, it was a pleasure when I just happened to come across the Avro Heritage Museum by accident. Going back to my old job after I come out of British Aerospace at Stevenage, I ended up doing model railways and building model railways and stuff like that for London Transport Museum and Hamburg in miniature Wonderland in Hamburg in Germany. When I came out of that, I used to do the exhibitions over at the Manchester hangar where the Concorde is, and they had the Avro Heritage Museum had a stand there, and I think it was might have been Richard Jones at that time that I was talking to, and he said you need to come over because they have a Nimrod at Manchester 231 with it, I think. And they said, we've got 235 because 235 was the first one I worked on. So
what was your reaction when you heard that?
So I thought, well, I've got to go over and see it and see if it's still got a few of my delicate repairs on. And when I got here, I was talking to some of the guides, and I went on the Nimrod, and they were telling me a little bit of how to, and I said, you do this, and this is what, they suddenly realised that I worked on it, and they were short of people that actually knew what the Nimrod did in service. So really that's how I ended up.
What sort of shape, what was it in, Ron, at that time when it first came? Was it in reasonable shape?
Apart from its backside missing.
Otherwise,
it was in good nick, and they were just starting to get some lights on and powering it up. So
And what sort of jobs have you done on that aircraft in all the time you worked at the museum?
I haven't done a lot because I can only get down on a Saturday, because living in Fleetwood, the motorway is not that kind to me to get down during the week. But I've come up with ideas that should help people, and they've put that implemented it in. One of the things I did do was get the voice cockpit recorder in, and we got that running in the background so they can actually hear what was going on in the cockpits at that time. So that's one fame I've got.
And the other thing to say to listeners who we hope will be coming to the museum is you do fantastic cockpit tours. Did you enjoy doing this?
Oh, you really do, because a lot of the people, they know the Nimrod, and the only time they hear about the Nimrod was on its search and rescue role. It's the only time you ever saw it on the telly. When you tell them what it actually did, people were astonished. And then when you tell them that it was a nuclear aircraft as well, that puts them back. And they didn't really know what the Nimrod did until you start to explain it. And once they get it going, that's why I usually run overtime. They ask me too many questions then.
Because there is one control that's got C and N, hasn't it?
Yeah, on the
conventional nuclear. So.
Yeah, we always make the joke on that is that it's coffee, no sugar.
And again, perhaps for people thinking of coming to a museum, you can then have a go yourself, can't you, at hunting Russian submarines?
Yeah, the little simulator there is just a little simulator of what's done in real life. You obviously find the support ship, you know there's a submarine around, so you start to drop the Sonny boys out and you start to listen in for the sounds, and eventually you will find the submarine, but it's a cat and mouse. You can drop them quite, I've been on them before, and you dropped at least 100 Sonny boys out and you still can't find the bugger.
People ask us how much the sonar boy cost. Can you put a cost on that?
Yeah, the very early ones were around about £1,000 to £2,000 a go, and then when they got dropped into the sea, obviously they would sink and stay there. But the only people that used to make any money out of it was the fishermen, because they used to pick them up and they used to get about £500 back salvage. But if you ever did an exercise with the Navy, with the Americans or anything like that, just look for 300 fishing boats, because they knew where the submarine was and they were after the Sonny boys.
So if you're dropping 100, that's quite a big bill for the taxpayers.
Just a bit, and you don't always find them. I've enjoyed my time with the museum because I get clobbered to do Vulcan as well when there's not many about. I've just learned to do the Typhoon simulator, so I can now push the button and fly that. So, yeah, I can do the VC-10s, and the only one I can't do is the Lancaster, but that's old technology for me. So.
Ron, thank you ever so much. We really appreciate that. As you said, Saturday is your day, and we've had to take you just temporarily off the Nimrod, but I think somebody's been covering for you, so the museum hasn't suffered. But thank you ever so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you again to Ron for taking a little time off from his cockpit guiding duties to talk to us. If you come to the museum on a Saturday and visit the Nimrod cockpit, you'll have a good chance of meeting Ron and hearing him talk about our aircraft, the very first one, as he told us, that he worked on when he came out of training. And you may be lucky enough to hear some of Ron's other stories, which we couldn't really put in the podcast. Thank you for listening. Don't forget that if you subscribe to the podcast and you have push notifications enabled in your settings, you should get an alert when the latest episode of the Avro Heritage Museum podcast has been released. Please join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Chris Beswick. Bye-bye.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.